able to mute everybody?
Yes, so I'll be able to mute everyone. Good morning, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. We've got a few more folks coming in from our waiting room. Thank you all for joining us bright and early this morning. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us for our virtual workshop, our government contracting series for WOSB, EDWOSB federal certification process. And our presenter, Ms. Lisa Wood, is going to share with us all about all the acronyms that we're going to learn about today and how to go through this process. So we are so excited that you all are here bright and early and ready to learn. Before we get started, I am going to go over a couple housekeeping things. We are recording today's workshop, and I will share that out with you all who have joined us live today. We'll also be posting this later on our YouTube channel, which I'll post a link to in the chat in just a few minutes. A couple other housekeeping things. If you would please keep your microphone muted as we are recording today's workshop. Our workshop today is scheduled for 2 hours. And closed captioning is available. If you'd like to turn that on, we can have that available for you. I encourage you to take notes and jot down things that are relevant to you. We will be sharing the slides as well as the presentation recording also. If you have questions for Lisa, if you want to drop those in the chat, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, that's a great way for us to interact here remotely. And I will be keeping an eye on that and keeping a running list of questions for Lisa as we go. Other things, if you are interested, if you don't want to publicly announce in the chat, you are welcome to direct message me, and I will take notice of that and put those in the list of questions for Lisa as well. And after today's workshop, we welcome you to schedule an appointment with one of our SBDC advisors or with Lisa and her team in the PTAC office. And at the end, I will have a evaluation, if you will, that just gives us some information about the presentation today. So we are planning for 2023, and no government contracting is an opportunity for so many of you. We'd like to hear some feedback from you about today's workshop. So if you would be so kind, that does come back anonymously to us, but I will post it at the very end during our question and answer. All right, moving forward, for those of you that are not familiar with the SBDC, the Roanoke Regional SBDC serves the greater Roanoke Valley, the Allegheny Highlands, Franklin County, and the New River Valley. In addition to providing workshops, events, and programs, we also offer all kinds of resources available to you, regardless of what stage you're in your business. We have articles available to you, worksheets, and we also have an advisor match. If you've not gotten matched with an advisor, I'll encourage you to do that and ask you a couple questions and get you matched with one of our advisors, whether you're here locally or across the state. We'll get you matched with the SBDC that's closest to your business. And if you're not in our service area, we're a part of the Virginia SBDC network that has 27 different centers across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And as I mentioned, we serve and support businesses through all stages of your life, whether you're growing and expanding your business or you're wanting to acquire another business, you're ready to exit, you're just getting started. Regardless of what stage you're in, we are here along the ride with you over the life of your business. So how do we do all this amazing work? We are funded in part through a grant through the United States Small Business Administration, the Virginia SBDC, the Americas SBDC, the George Mason University Mason Enterprise Center. Pandemic-related capacity building grants have been funded by Go Virginia. And we want to give a special thanks to our host who provides support and space for our work, the Roanoke Regional Chamber of Commerce. In addition to these partners, we also collaborate with local economic development offices, local governments, and other small businesses to provide support for our work here in our region that we serve. We have lots of other upcoming workshops. I would be remiss not to share them with you. This is just a snapshot of a few of our upcoming workshops that are offered locally through the Roanoke Regional SBDC, as well as across the state for other SBDC partners to collaborate. And because we're virtual, we can bring things to you with a click of a few buttons, which makes things really nice so you don't save some windshield time during the day. All right. And if you're not following us on social or have subscribed to our YouTube channel, I'll encourage you to do that. We're active on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn at RRSBDC. And I'll post a link to our YouTube channel where there's our previous government series workshops, as well as a lot of other workshops available to you. All right. The moment we've all been waiting for and why we are here today is to hear from Ms. Lisa Wood. Lisa is our statewide director of the Virginia PTAC, which is hosted by George Mason University, where Lisa is also an adjunct professor of management. Prior to that, Lisa served as a statewide director for the Connecticut and Ohio PTAC programs, and is also director for the Northwest Commission PTAC in Pennsylvania. Before joining the PTAC community, Lisa was a procurement specialist for the Bechtel Plant Machinery Incorporated in the greater Pittsburgh area. In this role, Lisa performed contract administration and negotiation duties. She also recommended bidders, handled issues, inquiries, negotiated bids, performed cost and price analysis, and performed comprehensive letters to justify recommended contract actions. Lisa holds an MBA from the University of New Haven and a BSBA through Robert Morris University of Pittsburgh, where she is also pursuing her PhD in instructional management and leadership. Y'all, we have a powerhouse with us today, and I'm so excited to introduce my colleague and friend, Lisa Wood. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and transition the control over to Lisa. So bear with us for just a second. But if Lisa, if you want to introduce yourself more than I have, feel free to do that, and we will keep on rolling here.
Well, thank you, Heather. Not much I have to add to that. Thank you for the kind introduction. And thank you all for coming to and participating in today's event. The Woman-Owned Small Business certification that SBA formalized 2 years ago has been really problematic. We've really had to work hard to get women certified and go through issues, and SBA didn't make it easy on us, and it continues to evolve. So at the end of the program, I'm going to talk about some updates to the program that SBA has out for comments. So let me just see if I can move my slide here. There we go. Okay, today we're going to talk about the myths concerning this particular certification, and then how you can find out whether you're eligible or not. I don't want to be there. There, sorry. Some navigating around the certification portal and what happens when you get a deficiency letter. So here's some myths about the program. And I've heard these come straight from women business owners, and these are some of the things that we can help you overcome. But if you know these right up front, it's going to save you a lot of effort. So some business owners think because they're third-party certified, they're done. So they may have gone through WeBank or Women's U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That isn't enough. You can go through that process, but you still need to upload that certificate into the SBA's portal. So it's important that you don't think that you're certified because you're third-party certified and that you're able to bid on set-asides. That's not true. It's only part of the process. And some feel that their third-party certifier will go into the SBA portal and enter all that information for them. And that is not true either. You and only you can go in and put that certificate into the SBA's portal. Some people who have been around for a while think that because they were in the original certified.sba.gov that they don't need to reapply, and that's not true. That was at this SBA.
Lisa, we've lost your audio, if you can still hear us.
What was that, Heather?
I was saying we lost a little bit of your audio, probably the last 30 seconds you faded out.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So, and some business owners think because they self-certify in SAM that no other action is required, and that's not true either. You still need to go through the SBA's formal certification process. Heather, these slides are going really slow.
Do you want me to take back over the control and see if that helps?
Take back over. You might be able to move them quicker than me.
Okay.
So eligibility. Now I left a link here that goes straight to the SBA's program. And I highly recommend that you go and do your due diligence and your homework, find out everything you need to know about this before you begin the process. Because the worst part of this is doing something that you're not eligible for, going through all the work and then having them kick it back saying, sorry, you can't apply. The most important thing is your NAICS codes. So there are specific NAICS codes that need to be in place in your system of award management before you can proceed with EDWOSB and WOSB, especially the EDWOSB, and it's very limited. And the few NAICS codes that they gave us for business, they've now taken away for EDWOSB with the latest and greatest NAICS updates. Next slide, please. So in order to be eligible for these two programs, of course, you have to be a small business and be 51% or more owned and controlled by women who are US citizens. So they're going to ask you for your citizenship record. So you have to be prepared for that. And women manage the day-to-day operations and also make the long-term decisions. So you're asking, well, of course I do. But the problem with that is there are people out there who are scamming the system. That's why this formal certification was designed, to make sure there aren't businesses stealing business from truly women-owned businesses. That's called a pass-through. Next slide, please. So EDWOSB, you have to meet the requirements of WOSB, but you have to less than $750,000 of personal net worth. You have to be owned and controlled by one or more women, each with $350,000 or less in adjusted gross income, average over the previous 3 years, and be owned and controlled by one or more women, each 6 million or less in personal assets. So these are pretty big numbers, and most of us don't have these type of assets, but you really need to ask yourself if you have that type of asset. If you exceed any of these, then don't do EDWOSB. The important thing you need to understand with EDWOSB is, do you have the NAICS code? To qualify for EDWOSB, you have to be very careful with this. I get clients all the time. They're trying to do EDWOSB, which is pretty painful because you have to put all your financials in and income tax returns, both personal and professional. And you're doing a lot of work that you're not even qualified to do EDWOSB. So make sure that you truly qualify for this before you move forward with it. And third-party certifiers, some of them will try to get you through EDWOSB. They're going to ask you for a lot of things that aren't necessary. So make sure you truly are eligible for this part before you proceed with it. Next slide. So these are the documents that you will need to provide for WOSB. Of course, you have to be active in SAM. I highly recommend that you go through your SAM first. And on the contacts page, contact, you select the option party performing certification. You're going to want to check that box and put that information in. And now, oh, I missed the DUNS. No longer DUNS. UEI, EIN, and MPIN. You need to have those fully available when you're doing your registration. Your proof of citizenship, either an unexpired passport or a birth certificate. You're going to need your resume. Make sure you check that resume. Make sure that your business is actually on top as your present employment, and make sure your resume clearly shows you have the ability to manage and control your business. And of course, if any joint venture agreements are in place, you're going to have those documents available. So that's just as a regular business. And then as a corporation, you're going to need your articles of incorporation, stock certificate, stock ledger, corporate bylaws and amendments, and meeting minutes. That's always a hard one. If you don't have these things, then you need to gather them up and create them, especially the copy of stock certificates front and back. A lot of people they've become an S Corp, but they don't have any of this. They don't have meeting minutes or just them, but they're still designed as or structured as a corporate entity. But you got to show this stuff or you can't get through it. An LLC will need an operating agreement that's signed and dated. Some of them are even required to be notarized. And if you are a single entity, it's just you, that operating agreement has to show and be labeled as single entity operating agreement. That clearly designates it's just one person. If there are multiple people in your organization, that's it, more than you and maybe somebody else or others, you have to make sure that operating agreement only gives you the right to make decisions for the organization. Nobody can make a decision about the organization except the women business owners. They will kick it back if that language says anything different. So in your absence, no one can make a decision, especially in a quorum, for your business without you being there. And then articles of organizations, which come from your state. So here in Virginia, it's the State Corporation Commission, and you have to have those articles of organization all up to date and ready to go. And partnership, if you're a partnership, you'll have to show your partnership agreement. And as a sole proprietor, you're going to have to show your DBA, or doing business as, or trade name certificate, which you also get from the State Corporation Commission. Next slide. So for EDWOSB, of course, every requirement listed for WOSB, only on top of all of that, you're going to have your personal financial information. And that's where this becomes hard. You're going to have all your tax returns, all schedules for business and personal. Keep the W-2s separate, but make sure you are labeling everything correctly. You're going to have to show all of your assets, cash on hand, money in bank, stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, and your most recent statements. And you're going to provide the IRS Form 4506, which is a request for your tax transcript, because some people in the past have doctored their tax returns before they submitted them to the SBA. So they ask for this so they can actually ask the IRS to send them a transcript of your tax return. So you have to submit this as well. Next slide. And don't forget about your spouse. Even if they are not a partner, you have to have a link sent to them so they can provide their part of the information because some women hide their assets in their spouse's name. So they need to have the spouse's information as well. If your spouse is your partner, they're 49% or less, then they will come in as the partner instead of the spouse. Next slide, please. So when you're creating your documents, they have to be a PDF, no bigger than 25 megabytes, or they're not getting through. You want to make sure you are labeling them clearly. Just put whatever it is, operating agreement, articles of organization, tax returns, 2019. Do not add anything else to the labeling, because if it isn't clear or apparent to the analysts, they're going to say they don't have it. So resume, don't say CV, or they're going to come back and say, I can't find that, you didn't send it. So make sure you say resume, and make sure they are not password protected. So your tax returns, if you're getting them from your accountant, accountants most often send them password protected. So you're going to have to print them all out, rescan them back in, and save them as what they are, labeled as, you know, what the year is and what the content is. So just make sure they're not password protected. Next slide. So third-party certifiers. So this is where a lot of the confusion comes in. These are the ones that are sanctioned by SBA to be third-party certifiers, and there's nothing wrong with third-party certification. There is a charge. So it can be upwards to $500 a year to be third-party certified. So if you use this to qualify and you upload your certificate into the SBA portal, you're going to have to do that every year, because this needs to be uploaded every year. Now, I like third-party certification for networking because it taps you into other women business owners throughout the country. So it's good that way. And commercial world, which doesn't accept federal certifications, and these are big firms like Johnson & Johnson, Nestle, casinos, big corporate companies that they're not government clients, they're just commercial world. They'll accept their certification as well. But for purposes of federal set-asides, you need to get this, put it into the SBA portal, and do it yearly. So next slide, please. So this is what the site looks like for the registration. It is beta.certify.sba.gov. Make sure you're in the right place. So when you get here, just select login. Next slide, please. So, and accept, of course. Next slide. It's going to take you to login.gov. So don't get confused by this. Login.gov is a third-party certifier for the entry into federal agencies. They are the keeper of logins. So it looks just like your SAM login, and you are right. But it's also used for SBA and other federal agencies' sites as well. So it's always the same username and password. Do not create a new username and password. When you get to this, you will use the same email and password you used to get on SAM, because what's going to happen is it's going to go talk to SAM, and it's going to pull information from SAM into your application. So just make sure you are using your SAM email address and password when you get here. Next slide. So it's going to ask you to claim your business. And I'm sorry, I did this prior to UEI. So instead of DUNS, it will say UEI. So you'll put your UEI in there. your EIN, your tax ID number, and your MPIN from SAM. So hopefully you kept careful notes when you did your SAM and you have that MPIN ready to go. Next slide. So it will pull up all your information and you'll just verify that, and then you'll move on to the actual registration part. So this is the eligibility. So it's going to ask you, is this your primary NAICS code? And it's going to give that code, and it's what they pulled from SAM for you. And of course you say yes. It's going to ask you how many employees, and it's going to ask you for your revenue, and it's just trying to determine size, making sure you are small. So if you've been in business for 3 years, you'll just pick the 3 years that you've been in business. If you've been in business 10, just pick the most recent 3, because they're going to do a 3-year average. Next slide, please. So for profit, yes, because if you're a not-for-profit, you don't qualify, because not-for-profits are considered large in the eyes of the government. So you're going to say, yes, I'm for profit. And then it's going to ask for your business type. And this is your legal structure. So partnership, limited liability partnership, or whatever you are, corporate entity, you're going to say yes to this. And hopefully it matches what's in SAM. Next, please. So if you are debarred, it's going to ask if you have active exclusions. So if you had a business that was debarred from federal contracting, you'll have to answer this honestly, but I'd say all of you are pretty much not debarred, and you've never been excluded from government contracts. So you'll say no. Next slide. And your citizenship. This is the first thing you have to upload. So hopefully you already have your passport scanned into your computer. Make sure it is not expired. If it is expired, use your birth certificate. If your birth certificate is in your maiden name and you now have another name, you're going to have to show your marriage certificate. So you can't put your birth certificate out here if the name is different than the name you're using for the certification. Just make sure you're documenting your name in here to show that you're a citizenship. Next slide. So this is where you will check your answers. Basic eligibility, it's the first card that you're going to fill out. It's the easiest. So just go through and make sure everything is properly showing how you answered it. Next slide. Now you have a dashboard. This is a good thing. And all your information should match here. Make sure you check it to determine if there are any mistakes. It should match what you entered. Then down here, I had a hard time capturing this screen. This is where you're going to click. It says new application and it's dotted. It actually looks like it's ghosted out, but it's not. You're going to click on new application here. Next slide. So it's going to ask you if you have a delegate. I'm going to respectfully ask you not to assign a delegate to do this for you. Please do it yourself, because it ends up going bad and they have to get a link. They have to fill it out. They don't have your information. You have to end up providing all the information to them anyways. And 9 times out of 10, it gets stuck in the submission phase because you are the only one who can do the attestation and submission. So please say no to this. If for some reason you have to have a delegate, just be careful how everything's being answered and keep an eye on it. So I highly recommend you say no to delegates here. Next slide. So if you do decide to do the delegate, these are the instructions on how to make that work. You're going to have them sent a link. They're going to have to fill out the information. You have to assign the delegate. You have to fill in their information, and then they come in and complete your application for you. But remember, you're the one who has to submit in the end. Next slide. So this is very similar to 8A. You have, these are called cards. So if you finished your basic certification, it will say completed. Basic eligibility completed, and then it's going to go into ownership. It will say needs more information. So they do it red and green because we all know red is stop, green is go. Next slide, please. So these are just the warnings by SBA saying, hey, if you lie, you're in trouble. Make sure everything you're saying here is honest and truthful. Next slide. So here's ownership. This is where you are proving your ownership, and you're going to say, yes, I am 51% or more owned and controlled by a woman. And then it's going to ask you, is it one or more economically disadvantaged women? So you're going to have to ask yourself here, am I doing WOSB or I'm doing EDWOSB? Please make sure you select the right one here, because if you select economically disadvantaged, you can't go back and change it. It's really hard to get that back to WOSB once you commit to EDWOSB. So really know which one you want to pursue at this point. Next slide. So it's going to ask you a lot of legal information. Are there executory agreements, voting trusts, or other arrangements that could potentially cause you not to be the firm's owner? Like somebody else could be calling the shots. You're in some sort of protected trust. So you want to make sure that you are not in that area and answer this truthfully. And if you ever have a question, always read the blue box. There's a more civilized, easier to understand language in the blue box that will explain what you're answering here. Next slide. So direct ownership, yeah, hopefully you're all the direct owner. No one is pulling your strings. No one's telling you what to do. You make the day-to-day decisions of the organization. Next slide. And of course, hopefully you're not a trust. You'll say no to trusts and revocable trusts. Just answer it truthfully if you are in the situation. I have never had this situation. In all the years I've been doing certifications for SBA, I've never had anybody who had a revocable trust or been a trustee in their business. Sometimes you inherit a business and you're just a figurehead. You're not really making the decisions. Somebody else is. Next slide, please. So if you are a partnership, you want to make sure that 51% of that partnership is woman-owned, 51 or greater. Now, I have had 2 women who were 50-50. That's fine. They're both women. There's not a problem with that. But you just want to make sure you have a partnership agreement and it clearly states your percentage of ownership. Next slide. And then just go in. This is where you're going to upload that partnership agreement. And once again, please read it. Make sure the language clearly shows the woman business owner is the majority owner and the woman business owner controls the organization, makes all the decisions. Because if it's a partnership and you have a partnership agreement and you've got a man as your 49 or less % owner, and it shows that document that they are able to make decisions, in that business that impacts the business, they will kick it back. So just make sure that language in the partnership agreement says only the female majority owner can make decisions that impact the business. Next slide. And fictitious names. You want to make sure you have your fictitious name. Notice if you have a DBA, you'll have that in the SCC, the State Corporation Commission in Virginia. That's where the DBA lives. So you want to make sure that you upload this. And of course, you've already done that. If you went through your SAM, you had to provide that as well. Next slide. So we're done with ownership. So just make sure that everything is answered correctly. Next slide. So the next thing that we're going to do is control. We have the control card up here, but this is what you're going to see next. And you'll just go into the one that says need more information. Next slide. This existing certifications that you might have. If you are 8A, you are automatically able to be EDWOSB, but you have to upload your annual attestation letter from SBA and your approval letter if you just were 8A certified. So if you were 8A, you would say yes to this. Next slide, please. If you were third-party certified, you would say yes, and you would select which one you were third-party certified for, and you would upload your document, your certificate. Next slide. If you are a veteran or service-disabled veteran and you're verified through CVE, through the VA, you're eligible for WOSB, and you will upload your CVE approval letter here. Next slide. So if you're any of those, you immediately go to upload the submission. You don't have to do anything else. You're automatically, it's sort of like fast track. So if you're any of those certifications, then you can bypass everything else and go straight to submission. So if you're a corporation and an S Corp, you need to show your stock ledgers, stock certificates, front and back. The ledger should show any exchange, or like some people buy a partner out and have to show that exchange and the dollar values of the ledgers in the ledger, the dollar values of the stock, and the corporate bylaws. So you need to show all this. So it's a little bit harder when you're a corporation and S Corp to provide all the information that's needed. It's just another layer. Just remember you have all this loaded on your computer before you start the application. Next slide. Then it's going to ask, of course, the ledger and stock certificates. You're going to upload this. Make sure the majority is with the woman business owner. Next slide. If you're an LLC, a little bit easier. You just need your articles of organization, operating agreement. Make sure it's signed and dated and shows that you are 51% owner and that you're in charge of the day-to-day operations of the firm. You can only be the one that makes the decisions. This is not a group decision. I've had a lot of operating agreements get kicked back because it was a partnership and the partner was able to make decisions or be able to vote on decisions. You have to show that even though you're only 51% owner, you're the only one who is allowed to make decisions in the organization. Next slide. So in control, it's going to ask you, are you in control of long-term decisions and day-to-day management? Yes, of course you are. Always say yes to that. Next slide. Highest position. So you want to make sure, yeah, you are the highest position. This is where you upload your resume. Please check your resume before you upload it. I'm sure some of you have multiple resumes. Label the resume you're using as the WOSB resume, because you might have a job somewhere else and you have that one listed first. Or you might not be showing that you have the technical skills and abilities to manage this business. So just make sure that resume clearly shows you are in charge, you do everything in the business, and you have the background to manage the control of the operation. Next slide. So technical expertise and license, you don't have to have that, but it's nice to have. So let's say, for example, you own an electric service company. You provide residential electrical service and commercial electrical service, but you're not an electrician. You don't go into homes or businesses and put in a new panel box. You hire people to do that, but you manage and control the organization. So you have to be careful how you answer this. You might not have the technical expertise or the license, but you are running the business. You bid on the work, you collect the money, you do the invoicing, you do it all. You make all the decisions in the organization, but you hire someone to do the work for you. And some of the times it's your husband, but you're still the one running the business. So you have to be able to defend this if they push back. Yeah, it might be my husband who's the licensed electrician, but I'm the one calling the shots. I'm the one running the business. Next slide, please. Devotion. So this is another tough one because many of you have another job. You have a day-to-day bread and butter job until your business gets up and running. You have to write a letter saying, I have another job and these are the hours and that I work, and give them, like, I work at say 9 to 5, 4 days a week. But on my business, I work in the evenings 7 to 10 and on weekends, and give the hours. You have to be able to demonstrate that you are giving full-time devotion to this business that you're trying to get certified, even though you work somewhere else. So we're going to get into this later because that is part of the new rules that they have out on comments. So we're going to revisit this later on in the presentation. Next slide. So this is just a summary of control, and just make sure that all those answers match what you think you put in there. Next slide. So for EDWOSB, it's just a completely different application. Next slide. So you've got to provide financials. Your W-2s, keep them separate, but label them. W-2s 2019, W-2s 2020, make it as clear and simple as possible. Make sure you are uploading everything, the 1040, all the pages, all the schedules. Make sure you do this 4506E. It's easy to get to. You can Google it and download that form, but it's got to be there and it has to be signed and filled out. Next slide. Just make sure that your adjusted gross income over the past 3 years is less than $350,000. Next slide. Your net worth. So net worth does not include the value of your home or your retirement accounts, but you still have to give them that information. You have to upload your retirement accounts, the most recent statement, so they can look at it and say, oh yeah, that's definitely a retirement account. Because just because you have a mutual or stocks and bonds, that's not necessarily an official retirement account. It has to say on the statement, it is a retirement account. Next slide. So assets. fair market value of all assets have to be less than 6 million. So assets, the value of the house and the retirement accounts go back in for the $6 million calculation. So what you have as principal on your home, you know, it's principal value, and your retirement accounts, those will go back into the 6 million. And you need to answer if any of your assets have been transferred. So some people want to work the system and they'll transfer a lot of their assets to a parent, son or daughter. So they're going to ask you this question. So just be truthful, and hey, if you don't qualify for EDWOSB, there's no harm, no foul. Just do WOSB. Next slide. Cash on hand, that's just money you have in the house. No need to overthink this. I always tell people, say $100. You have $100 in your house right now, cash. It's not in an account. It's in your jewelry box or under your mattress. So you just put a value in there. Next slide. Other sources of income, you might have a salary and they'll see that on your personal tax returns, or you're on your W-2. You might have other income like child support or rental income from a rental property. So you want to make sure that you disclose all that, because they're going to see it on the tax return. Next slide. And of course, the most recent statement you have, it cannot be older than 30 days. And you got to put that in there. Make sure all the information is on there. Next slide. Life insurance policy. Some people have a cash surrender value type of life insurance policy. Take a look at what you have. See if there's cash value to it if you surrender it. If not, say no. Next slide. Stocks and bonds. A lot of us have stocks and bonds in mutual funds. You'll have to give the statements on those and make sure that you have the number of shares and the value of each share. Next slide. Your primary residence. What you're going to do is look up your house on Zillow or Troya, and you are going to put the value in based on that. And they're going to ask you, so what's your mortgage and what's the value? So put in the address, and it's going to ask you even when you moved in there. Next slide. Once again, your vehicles, Kelley Blue Book. That's where you go to find this. Just do retail value, put what it's in, the loan balance, and a description of the asset, but use Kelley Blue Book to get those values. Next slide. So you can see why EDWOSB is challenging. That is a lot of stuff to pull together. And I always tell people, make sure you're actually going to benefit from EDWOSB before you select that. So individual contributors, this is where you would add a partner. Whether it's 49% or 10%, you have to add that person. They're going to get an email link to create their own profile and answer the questions. And that could include board members or anyone that has stakehold in your organization. Next slide. And I had a problem with that a few weeks ago. The young lady put in her partner's email address, but the email address was not the email address that partner uses in SAM. So we couldn't get her to show up in the profile. And we had to go back into the profile and change the email address to match what she had on her login.gov to make it work. So just be careful there that you're thinking about what email address that's being sent to. It's the one that that partner has as their SAM profile. This is where you would add, this is what it looks like when you're done. That person's name should show up, their role, and of course, completed. Once they've done it, doing their side of it, you'll see that on there. So that's how you know you've done it right. Next slide. So you'll see on individual contributors, there's this section, it's at the bottom, firm owner questionnaire. Make sure you click on that. It's easy to miss. There's no real guidance on where to find this, but the individual contributors, that comes in really high up in the choices. And the firm owner questionnaire is way at the bottom. So make sure you're scrolling down and clicking on the firm owner questionnaire so that you can fill it out. Next slide. It won't let you upload until you do it. So you'll add other firm owners if you have it. Some people have multiple, 3 or 4 people as owners in the organization. They all have to fill this out. Next slide. And your spouse. If your spouse is not a partner, the spouse still has to fill out their own profile. So make sure you send that link to your spouse and have them complete their part. Next slide. So once you're all done with this information, you're all the way through it all, you will click on these boxes. They'll be clear, but when you click on them, they turn blue. It's just saying, I didn't lie, I didn't cheat, I answered as honestly as I could, and I'm eligible. Next slide. And then you're going to attest and submit. Your name should be here, nobody else's. Make sure your name shows it. I've had husbands doing this for their wives, and we get to this page and it's the husband's name instead of the wife. And we've had to ask the SBA to completely withdraw the application so we could start over again. So make sure if any husbands are out there doing this for their wives, you are not putting your name anywhere, and your name is not showing up in SAM. Make sure it's your wife's name everywhere. Next slide, please. So once you do that, on your dashboard, it's going to say submitted. And then eventually, if everything looks good, it will go to pending. And then it will say approved. Once it's approved, the dynamic small business search will be updated by the SBA to reflect your status. That's where contracting officers will go to see if you are truly certified as a WOSB or EDWOSB. Next slide. So if they find something wrong and they're not happy and they want you to fix something, they're going to send you a deficiency letter. And they'll send it to your email, or they'll send you an email saying, hey, we found a problem and we need you to go back into your dashboard and fix it. This is what we found lacking. So when this happens, make sure you respond immediately, and make sure you're checking your junk and your spam folders, because for some reason, even though it's coming from a .gov, it's ending up in people's junk folders. So they're not seeing it for days. And by the time they do find it and see it and read it, the 5 days are up. And SBA is then saying, oh, you're declined because you didn't respond in 5 days. So just make sure you're looking for any correspondence from the SBA WOSB desk. So the deficiency letter, that's another animal. And it's the same thing 8As get when they submit their 8A. Almost everybody gets a deficiency letter, because the people reading this stuff, they always find something wrong. So hopefully it's nothing bad that you can't go and easily fix. Next slide. So you're going to go into the card that they have highlighted in red, and you're going to go in and upload the information that's required. Next slide. And then you'll submit. It's pretty easy. You just put in what they're asking for. You see in red here, their ownership. We need some more information here, and just put it under, sometimes business document. They'll have a opening under business document. You can put it there, and they go by the date, because all your documents are listed. in a document list on your dashboard, and they'll go by the most recent date of the upload and see what you sent them. So don't worry about putting it in the right place. Next slide. So these are the new updates that SBA just put out for comments, and I'm pretty happy with this. So under the new proposed rules that SBA regs have for ownership and control of these programs, is they're just changing it. They're not making it as stringent. So one of the requirements is that the qualifying woman must manage the company on a full-time basis and be devoted full-time to the company. I mean, they really have been pushing back on that. But SBA's proposed to revise this requirement to provide that the qualifying woman cannot engage outside obligations that prevent her from devoting sufficient time and attention to the business to control its management and daily operations. So SBA understands that a woman can, we'll say can, devote sufficient time to the WOSB business after normal working hours without preventing her from controlling the WOSB. So that is huge. And I see no reason why this will not pass. So it's just out for comment. And I feel that it will be made rule shortly. So the other one is, if you currently are certified by SBA as a WOSB, EDWOSB, you are likely familiar with the requirements that companies must undergo an annual attestation each year and full program examination every 3 years. So now, and so for the past year, anyone trying to do their attestation, SBA is coming back and saying, oh, we're pushing that out. You don't have to do it yet. And it just kept repeating that, and no one can do their annual attestations. So now the SBA proposes to omit the annual attestation requirement, which makes us all happy, and simply keep the program examination every 3 years instead, which makes sense. Why wouldn't they have done that in the first place? And also, SBA's regulations propose that in order to qualify as an EDWOSB, a company must be a small business under its primary NAICS code. However, for WOSBs, the regulation simply states that the company must be small in any NAICS code. So in the proposed rule, SBA says, hey, we're revising the regulation to require applicants to simply demonstrate that it qualifies as small under any NAICS code which it currently conducts business. This will be a huge welcome change. And so a company that qualifies as small for each contract, which may or may not be under the primary NAICS code, will be able to do their WOSB. So those are 3 changes coming up that will really help this. Some businesses that got kicked back because they had a job outside their own business can reevaluate and resubmit again. So I just ask, please don't try to do this yourself. PTACs are a free service. We do these every day. We know the ins and outs, we know the tricky parts, we know what you should do and should not do when you're doing this application. We want to get as many women certified as possible. So just make sure you come to us. We are happy to help you. Don't wait until it's a problem. Don't wait until you have your deficiency letter and you come to us and say, hey, could you help me with the deficiency letter? But we will do that too. Don't be embarrassed if you did it on your own and got the deficiency letter. We're still happy to help you. So next slide, please. And this is our contact information. If you aren't in the Virginia PTAC at George Mason University's territory, because we cover 84 counties in the state, there are other PTACs. There's Crater PTAC and Southwest Community College in the tail end of Virginia. And common topics, we help with all these things. So we're here to help, and we work closely with the SBDC to just make sure you're getting all the tools you need to be successful in business and government contracting. So please, don't hesitate to reach out to us. It won't cost you anything. And you'll have a one-on-one session to help somebody go through your SAM and your dynamic small business search and capability statement, and of course, help you qualify for these very important set-asides. So are there any questions? Be happy to answer them.
Yes, ma'am. We have lots of questions for you. So what I'm going to do is I am going to stop our recording.